I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if it's visible, okay? Is it visible?
Yes, Devi.
Yes,
Yes,
Didi.
Didi.
Yes, yes.
So, fourth unit, Patanjali Yoga Sutra. First chapter of fourth unit, Samadhi Path. There are 4 chapters: Samadhi Path, Sadhan Path, Vibhuti Path, and Kevalya Path. So, in Samadhi Path, there are 51 sutras. So, what is yoga? Yoga is one of the 6 Indian philosophies, darshanas. So, Yoga Darshana is written by Maharishi Patanjali, named as Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Maharishi Patanjali is the incarnation of Adishesha. All those things we have already learned in the previous classes, if you have remembered. So, this is just a brief outline. So Maharishi Patanjali collected all the knowledge of yoga from the Vedas and compiled in the form of sutras. So what's the meaning of sutra? It means thread. This implies that the written words carry an underlying continuous thought. The various ideas connect together like the beads on a mala to form a complete philosophy. And Patanjali Yoga Sutra is a systematic and authentic text of yoga philosophy, Yoga Darshan, which explains about the discipline as the first sutra describes, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now then, yoga is being explained. So it is a text of Raja Yoga, which explains the way to attain the Kevalya or liberation. So meaning and nature of yoga. Sage Patanjali explained yoga as Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This is a definition of yoga given by Maharishi Patanjali, which means restraining the chitta from modification is called yoga. Controlling the mind modifications, controlling the vrittis is known as yoga. So there are 3 words: chitta, vritti and nirodha. So chitta means mind stuff, which includes manas, buddhi, ahankar. All these 3 combines, it makes, it is also known as antakaran, manas, buddhi, ahankar, right? And vritti means modifications of mind, and nirodha means control. So chitta vritti nirodha means bringing complete control of the mental modifications. According to Patanjali, yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. That means the cessation of modifications of mind. Now come to the concept of chitta. I am going according to the syllabus of NET. So the next is concept of chitta. So again, there are 3 things: buddhi, ahankar, manas, intellect, ego and mind. This is antakaran. So chitta can be defined as the mind stuff or mind field that is supposed to be composed of 3 components: manas, buddhi and ahankar. So manas is the recording faculty which receives impressions gathered by the senses from the outside world. So manas is recording faculty, and buddhi is the faculty of discrimination. It decides the reactions to impressions. And ahankara is the faculty of identity. It claims these impressions as its own and stores up them as individual knowledge. Let us understand through an example. Suppose Manas reports a large animate object is quickly approaching. So Manas have recorded that a large animate object is coming, right? And Buddhi decides that's a bull. It is angry, it wants to attack someone. And then Ahankara screams, it wants to attack me, Patanjali. That means it is I who am about to run away. So ahamkara is always about, this is faculty of identity. It claims these impressions as its own and stores up them as individual knowledge, right? So ahamkara screams, it wants to attack me. It is I who am about to run away. So later, from the branches of a nearby tree, ahamkara may add, now I know that this bull, which is not I, is dangerous. There are others who do not know this. It is my own personal knowledge which will cause me to avoid this bull in future. So then there are three qualities of chitta: Prakhya, Pravriti and Sthiti. Prakhya is the real nature of chitta, we can say, which is dominating by Sattva Guna, illumination from Sattva, and Pravriti is endeavor from Rajas, and Sthiti is inertia from Tamas. And when the faculty of Prakhya is influenced by Rajas and Tamas, what happens? Mind become inclined towards power and external objects. And when Prakhya is influenced by Tamas, that time mind inclines to impious acts, false knowledge, non-detachment and weakness. When the wheel of infatuation is completely removed and the mind becomes completely luminous, that is to say, when it has a clear conception of the cognizer, the organs of cognition, and the objects of cognized, that mind, being influenced by a trace of rajas, tends towards virtue, wisdom, detachment, and power.
Didi, what does it mean like Prakya illuminated by Sattva? Is
Eliminated,
it
eliminated.
illuminated? I said,
Yeah.
illuminated by Sattva. What does it mean? Like, is it something like a person who has
See, our
more
chitta has
Sattva or
three
something?
qualities. Our chitta has three qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Three gunas, right?
Yeah.
So, when it is in sattva state, that is the real nature of chitta. So that time it is illumined. It has discriminative power. It has illumination. It can discriminate everything. Okay, and when it is covered by rajas and tamas, that time it inclined towards power and external objects. Rajas always goes towards the activity, and tamas also goes towards the desires, right? So when this prakya, that means the chitta, is influenced by rajas and tamas, that time our mind become inclined towards power and external objects. And when it is only influenced by tamas or covered by tamas, mind inclines towards false knowledge, non-detachment, weakness. And when this wheel of infatuation, or we can say when this covering of tamas removed completely and the mind becomes completely luminous, when it has a clear conception, and that mind being influenced by a trace of rajas, and that tends towards virtue, wisdom, detachment, and power. And then again, further, when the contamination of
So,
rajas is entirely removed,
I
the
can I
mind
ask
rests
something?
in
Hello.
its, yeah.
In the previous slide, so if it is dominated by Sattva, then what happens?
Yeah, now we'll see what happens when it is dominating with sattva. It is when it is dominating with sattva, that is the real quality of chitta. Okay, chitta is always sattva guna, but there are two more qualities, rajas and tamas. So when
Uh,
there is a
I
combination of,
I got that, but like it is written, no, illumination from Sattva.
yeah,
So Rajas and Tamas is explained, but Sattva is not explained like this. When it is
yeah,
dominated by
I'm
Sattva, what
explaining.
happens?
Yeah, I'm explaining. When there is removal of rajas guna also, the mind rests in itself. That means in the real state of chitta. So realizes the distinction between buddhi and pure self. So that time when it is dominating with sattva now. So it realizes the distinction, that means discrimination between buddhi and the pure self, and proceeds to that form of contemplation which is known as dharma megha dhyana or dharma megh samadhi. So chitti shakti or consciousness is unchangeable, non-transmissible, illuminator only of things presented to it by buddhi, pure and infinite. See, when sattva guna is dominating, there is a vivek khyati. There is enlightenment of the discriminative knowledge. Okay, so vivek khyati or the enlightenment of distinction between the pure purusha and buddhi is of the nature of sattva principle and is thus opposed of chitti shakti, as there is a still touch of impurity. So what it is saying, that in chitti shakti also there is a touch of impurity, but when it is sattva dominance, then it is viveka khyati. So when mind retains the latent impressions alone, that is known as nirbija or objectless samadhi. It is called asampragyat yoga because in this state there is no sampragyat. So this sampragyat and asampragyat samadhi will learn later.
One question.
Yeah.
So here this sattva is different from the sattva which we talk about in Gita, right? Because that sattva, rajas, tamas have a kind of different
See, this
principle,
now
I feel.
we are studying in context of chitta. That chitta has three qualities, right? Prakya, pravriti, and
Okay.
yeah. So there are three qualities: prakya, pravriti, and sthiti. Okay.
Yeah, but these three qualities are also of chitta only, na? Sattva,
And
rajas,
these
and tamas.
three qualities are from the gunas only. Prakya is
Yeah.
from sattva, pravriti is from rajas, and sthiti is from tamas.
So are these the names of these qualities only or something like, because it's really not clear till now, Prakya, Pravati and Sthiti.
Yeah, prakya, pravriti, and sthiti are three qualities of chitta. Just remember that. Okay.
And what about Sattva, Rajas, Tamas?
Prakya, pravriti, and sthiti, when there is like in our mind is dominating with tamas guna, that time it is in the state of sthiti, inertia. We feel so lazy, we don't want to do anything, so that time our mind is in the form of sthiti, dominating by tamas, right?
Okay.
And
Hmm.
when we think about doing actions, when our chitta wants to act, so that time it is dominating with rajas, pravriti is there. And when there is a discriminative knowledge, so that time it is prakya in its form, right? Illumination from sattva.
Okay.
Even when it is influenced by rajas, it tends towards virtue, wisdom, detachment, and power. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So next is chitta bhumis, states of mind. So Sage Vyas in his commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra elaborated the theory of Chitta Bhumi. Chitta Bhumi refers to the condition or state of mind in terms of concentration. There are 5 Chitta Bhumis explained: Shipta, Mudha, Vikshipta, Ekagra, Niruddha. So, what is Shipta? Shiptavastha is the lowest level. restless state of mind, disturbed, agitated, and this state is dominated by Rajas Guna. And what is mood avastha? Dull state of mind. In this state, person remains forgetful, blinded, and possessed of the sleep modification, and this state is dominated by Tamas Guna. Shiptavastha, it is the third state of mind where Sattva predominates, but Rajas also asserts itself at times. It is an oscillating state of mind, changing from steadiness to distraction due to predominance of Sattva and Rajas Guna. Then Ekagravastha, it is the state of mind where Sattva dominates entirely and Rajas, Tamas are subdued. The mind becomes concentrated on the object of meditation. In this state, the person is able to shut off all interruptions and can concentrate on any object of existence. In Niruddhavastha, it is a state characterized by control of mental modifications. In this state, the mental modifications are arrested through their latent, though their latent impressions may remain. The person starts merging into the superconsciousness and can experience peace. In the state of Niruddha, all sufferings are eliminated. So the first three levels are not conducive to yogic life, but last two are. So for yogic life, there should be Ekagravastha or Niruddhavastha. Niruddhavastha is a higher state of mind. After practicing Ekagravastha, then one can move towards Niruddhavastha. So now nature of Chitta. When the mind is in such a state, when Buddhi does not perceive any object, then the seer abides in itself. Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam, the real nature of Chitta, the real nature of mind stuff, right? So when there is no object, when Buddhi does not perceive anything, when there is nothing to perceive, so that time our Chitta abides in itself. So at that time, pure consciousness, the seer, abides in its own self, the real self, as it does in the state of liberation. Okay, so this is what happens when Buddhi does not perceive any object, when there is no perception. So that time it is in its own self. But what happens other times? So Patanjali explained, Vritti Sarupya Mitratra. So at other times, the seer appears to assume the form of the modification of the mind. Right? When Chitta is not in its own self, so that time it is in the modifications. So Vijnan Bhikshu said that mind is like a magnet and acts only in proximity, and by its character of being an object, it appears to become the property of Purusha, its owner. That is how the beginningless association of mind and Purusha operates as the condition of mental modification being revealed to Purusha. So now come to the, just give me 1 minute. हेलो पापा अभी क्लास चल रही है Yeah, so now come to the chitta vrittis. The word vritti is derived from the verb root brit, which means to behave, and also to revolve in a circular motion. Vrittis are the thought or reflection of world which makes the mind unstable. The mind is never without its modifications. We constantly perceive the world through our five senses. Vrittis rise in chitta, one after another, like the circular waves moving in the disturbed water. So according to yogic system, every dimension of knowledge, every kind of thought and every field of awareness is a vritti, modification of the mind. Alright, so again according to Patanjali, vrittis are of two types, klishta and aklishta, painful and non-painful. Vritya panchtasya klishta aklishta. Five vrittis are there which are of two types, klishta and aklishta. So those which are painful are known as klishta and those which are not painful are known as aklishta. So types of vrittis, like five vrittis. Modifications of mind according to Patanjali are fivefold. Praman, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smritya. So what is pramana now? Pramana is right knowledge. Pratyaksh, Anuman, Agma, Pramanani. So sources of right knowledge are Pratyaksh, Anuman and Agam. Pratyaksh, Anuman, Agamaha, Pramanani. So these are the sources of right knowledge. Pratyaksh, Anuman and Agam. What is Pratyaksha? Pratyaksha is direct cognition or perception. When we perceive anything directly through our senses, so it is Pratyaksha. Perception is that modification of mind which is caused by its contact with an external object through the sense channels. For example, we see a flower, we smell it, we hear someone crying, and so on. So all these are true knowledge, right knowledge, which is perceived by our senses, right? So whatever we are perceiving through our senses is known as pratyaksha. That kind of knowledge is pratyaksha. Okay, so anuman, inference. It is based on the experience which has never failed us. For example, we see smoke on a mountain and immediately infer that there must be fire on the mountain. Okay, so this is called anuman. We are seeing something, we are seeing the effect and we are infer the cause, right? Like we are seeing the smoke and like smoke is the cause. And what could be the effect of smoke? Fire. If there is a fire, there will be smoke, right? So it is mostly based on our experiences. Next is agam, which is testimony. It is useful in such circumstances where no sense evidence is available, as well as if there are not sufficient grounds for inference. So when there is no pratyaksh and no anuman, so in that circumstance, agama is there. Here we have to depend simply on what others say. But there is one condition. The person whose authority may be taken as a sufficient source of right knowledge and who is called an apta has to fulfill two conditions. First, he should have right knowledge himself, and secondly, he should be able to impart that knowledge without any mistake. Okay, so it doesn't mean we can trust on anyone. So that person should be apta. It should like he should have those qualities. He should have a right knowledge, and he should be able to impart that knowledge correctly, right? So that person is known as apt. We call agam as apt vachan also. So next vritti is viparya, wrong knowledge. Viparyo mithya jnanam tadrup pratishtham. It is a false knowledge which is not based on its own form. It is also known as avidya. For example, when we mistake a rope for a snake, our knowledge is incorrect because the thing that actually exists before us, which we take to be a snake, is a rope. Okay, so mistakenly when we think something as something else, so that knowledge is viparya, false knowledge. The next is vikalpa, imagination or verbal delusion. So शब्द ज्ञानान अनुपाति वस्तु शून्य विकल्पः. So verbal delusion arises when words do not correspond to reality. For example, when we read wonderful stories of fairy lands or about Lilliput and Gulliver's travels, we find words which can be used properly in sentences, but actually there are no real objects corresponding to them at all, right? So there are now, you can see so many games and so many animated movies. There are so many things which are not present in real life, but there is a verbal delusion, right? Because we have given them name, we have given them everything, but that doesn't exist in real. So it is not corresponding to real object. So when words do not correspond to reality, that time verbal delusion arises. So next vritti is sleep, nidra, abhav pratyalambana vritti nidra. Dreamless sleep is the mental modification produced by condition of inertia as the state of vacuity or negation of waking and dreaming. So since we can remember when we wake up that we had been sleeping, sleep is called a mental modification as indicated in the feelings expressed by phrases such as I slept well, I am feeling cheerful, I have cleared my brain, etc. Right? So that is also vritti. When we are sleeping also, we know that we are sleeping. So there is a mental modification. There is a thought again. So last one is smriti, memory or recollection. Anubhut vishya sampramosha smriti. So memory is when perceived objects are not forgotten but come back to consciousness. So memory is what? When perceived objects are not forgotten and coming back to consciousness. So memory is of two kinds, bhavita and abhavit. So remembrance of things only imagined, like unreal. In the dream state, memory of real things appear. Abhavita is remembrance of the things not imagined, real, while in awakening state, memory of real things appear. So we have studied about chitta, we have studied about vritti. Now come to the last part, nirodha. The word nirodha is a Sanskrit word which has the verb root rud, which means to stop the obstruction. Nirodha and chitta vritti nirodha thus means stopping of mental modifications completely, which can be brought about by regular practice of yoga. Yoga, according to Patanjali, is thus a method by which the restless mind is calmed and the energy is directed into constructive channels. So चित्त वृत्ति निरोधा उपाय. Abhyas and Vairagya are two instruments which help in achieving the control of mental modification as depicted in the following aphorism, following sutra. Abhyas Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodha. The modifications are restrained by perseverance and detachment. Abhyasa and Vairagya, practice and detachment. So, river of mind flows in two opposite direction. One is towards good and other one is towards evil. So when it goes towards good, there is a viveka or discriminative knowledge which leads to kevalya or liberation. And when it flows in the evil direction, there is a viveka or non-discrimination which leads to rebirth again. So therefore both abhyasa and vairagya are necessary. Indeed, it is useless and even dangerous to attempt one without the other. Like if we are practicing only abhyasa and we are not following vairagya, so there is no point, and it is like useless. We cannot get anything from that. So if we are practicing abhyasa, there should be vairagya also if we want chitta vritti nirodha, because if we'll practice and we are still attached with the worldly desires, so we cannot get free from the mental modifications. So abhyasa, it means repeated and persistent practice. Tatra sthito yatno abhyasah. Practice is the repeated effort to follow the disciplines which give permanent control of the thought waves of the mind. So, स तु दीर्घकाल नैरंतर्य सत्कार सेवितो दृढ़ भूमि. Practice becomes firmly grounded when it has been cultivated for a long time, uninterruptedly, with earnest devotion. Dirghakal, Nairantar, and the third one is Satkara Sevito. So practice should be for the long time, uninterruptedly, and with earnest devotion. So three conditions are important for practice of abhyasa. Dirghakal, it should go for long time. Nirantar, there should be uninterrupted continuity in the efforts. And Satkara Sevito, practice should be characterized with complete faith and positive feeling. All the three requirements, faith, long duration and regularity, are essential for yoga sadhana. According to Maharishi Patanjali, control of mental modifications can be done with abhyasa of yogic practices of Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, which are performed regularly for long time with faith. Therefore, abhyasa is very important for achieving chitta vritti nirodha. So now come to the Vairagya. Vairagya means detachment. It is a mental modification characterized by non-attachment for worldly objects, non-attachment for materialistic world. According to Maharishi Patanjali, Vairagya is the prerequisite and means to attain control of mental modifications. Patanjali defines Vairagya in following sutra: Drishta Anushravik Vishya Vitrishnasya Vashikar Sangya Vairagyam. So, he explained two types of Vairagya. First is Vashikar Sangya Vairagya, and the next one is Para Vairagya. So it's the state of awareness and control when an individual becomes free from craving for those sense objects which are seen and heard is called Vairagya, which is Vashikar Sangya Vairagya. Okay, Drishta Anushravik Vishya. So, what is Drishta Vishya and what is Anushravik Vishya? Vyas Bhashya he explained Drishta Vishyas are Stri, Ann, Pan and Aishwarya. Women, food, drinks and powers. So all those things are Drishta Vishya, which we see and we crave. Right? If we are seeing something attractive, like if we are seeing something good, so we crave for that thing. So Drishta Vishyas he explained as Tri, An, Pan, Aishwarya. And Anushravik Vishya means which we are perceiving through our ears, which we are hearing. So it is about Swarga, Videhe, Prakriti, Laya. See, uh, even if we are hearing about the Swarga and we are craving for the Swarga, we are doing our action, then we are expecting that we will go in the heaven. So this is also Anushravik Vishya. We want to be bodiless, Videha, and we want liberation. So all those things we have heard about and we want that. So we are attached with Anushravik Vishyas also. Right? So when the mind become indifferent to these things, when there is no attachment with all those things with Drishta Vishya and Anushravik Vishya, so that state is known as Vashikara Sangya Vairagya. It is the freedom from dualities of world, where mind remains free from raga and dvesha, attraction and repulsion. In this state, the person performs the acts dutifully but without attachment. Like we should act, we should perform our duties but without attachment. Vairagya makes the mind unaffected by the dualities of life, such as success and failure, attraction and repulsion, and and it leads to attain a state of equanimity. This state in itself is characterized by the control of mental modifications. It is one of the means to attain samadhi. So the next type of vairagya is para vairagya, the higher kind of vairagya, higher kind of non-attachment. Tat param purush khyatir guna ve trishnam. When through knowledge of the Atman, one control to desire any manifestation of nature, then that is the highest kind of non-attachment. Indifference to the gunas, that param purush khyatir guna, right? So indifference to the gunas, there are three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, and when there is indifference to them also, like we are not even attached with those gunas, which we are not even attached with the qualities, and we have gained the knowledge of Atman. And because we have gained the knowledge of Atman, there is indifference to the gunas. So that state is called Paravairagya, supreme detachment. So indifference to the gunas or the constituents, principles achieved through a knowledge of nature of Purusha or Atman is called Paravairagya. Now come to the concept of Bhav Pratyaya and Upay Pratyaya. So when Bhav Pratyaya Videhe Prakriti Layana, when such concentration, when such samadhi is not actually in between, they have also explained about Sampragyat Samadhi. So they are talking about that samadhi state when concentration is not accompanied by non-attachment and ignorance therefore remains. Like we are practicing samadhi but we are still attached. So if we are attached, we have not practiced non-attachment, we don't have vairagya, so it will lead to the ignorance. So the aspirant will reach the state of the disincarnate gods or become merged in the forces of nature. So that is Bhav Pratyaya, which is also non-worldly causes. And the next is Upay Pratyaya. Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pragya, Purva, Kitreshan. the concentration of the true spiritual aspirant. See, these are the first one, bhav pratyaya, in which samadhi is practiced with attachment. In upaya pratyaya, when the other kind of practicing method, other kind of when we practice samadhi with faith, energy, recollectedness, absorption, and elimination, that is upaya pratyaya. Concentration of true spiritual aspirant is attained through faith, energy, recollectedness, absorption, and illumination. So this is Sadhak Panchak also. Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pragya. Shraddha is faith, Virya is energy, Smriti is memory, recollection, and Samadhi is meditation or absorption. Here, and Pragya is discrimination or illumination. So, when there is Shraddha, Shraddha means complete faith in true reality. And when there will be faith, there is also need of energy. We should have energy. Without energy, you cannot follow any kind of instructions day after day and really test their value. And the Buddha pointed out that if there is any sin, it is laziness. So there should be activity, there should be energy to perform, right? As we have seen, tamas is the lowest condition, right? So in tamas sthiti, we cannot be active, we cannot, like, if we don't have energy, so we are in the tamas state. And if there will be energy, then the next step is smriti, recollection. And if we'll meditate, we'll practice the meditation, then there will be a state of discriminative knowledge. Our mind will be able to discriminate between opposite things. The next is Chitta Vikshepas, also known as Antaraya. Chitta Vikshepa means distraction or non-concentration of mind. This is a state of Chitta dominated by Rajas and Tamas. In this state, the person is not able to concentrate and therefore will not be able to lead towards Samadhi. Chitta Vikshepa is manifested in the form of various disruptive forces which cause obstacles in the path of yoga sadhana. These are manifested in various disruptive forces known as antarayas. Maharishi Patanjali in the following sutra gives 9 causes, hindrances, which disrupt and disturb chitta and distract it from the path of samadhi. So what are the vikshepas? Vyadi, Styan, Sanshya, Pramad, Alasya, Avriti, Bhranti, Darshan, Alabdh, Bhumi, Katva, Anavasthitvani, Chit, Vikshepa, Antaraya. So sickness, mental laziness, doubt, lack of enthusiasm, sloth, craving for sense pleasure, false perception, despair caused by failure to concentrate, and unsteadiness in concentration. These distractions are the obstacles to knowledge. In next sutra, Patanjali mentions 4 sub-hindrances, vikshep sahabhuvas, which may also be present with above 9 vikshepas. So if there are those 9 vikshepas, 9 antarayas are there, so it will be accompanied by grief, despondency, trembling of the body, and irregular breathing. Dukh, dormanasya, angmaya jatva, shwas prashwas, vikshep sahabhuvaha. So 4 vikshep sahabhuva. First is dukkha, Second is dormanasya. Then angmaya jatva, trembling of the body. Then shwas prashwas, irregular breathing. Then method to control these obstacles. एक तत्व अभ्यास. तत्प्रतिषेध अर्थ में एक तत्व अभ्यासः. They can be removed by the practice of concentration upon a single truth, single-mindedness. So, Patanjali explained about the single-mindedness. There should be faith in one thing, like we should have concentrate upon a single truth. There are a lot of things, and suppose there are different religions and there are different gods, and if a person is believing in everyone, he's not stick to one thing, he's not stick to one path, so they cannot get the ultimate aims, they cannot get the goal of life. It is like we are digging up in the well, but we are not getting the water, right? We are digging up so many wells, but we are not getting water from it because we are not going into so deep in one thing. So there should be a single mindedness, single object of concentration. So if there will be a practice of concentration upon a single truth, it can be removed. All the obstacles can be removed. The next is Chitta Prasadanam. Chitta Prasadana means achieving a blissful and tranquil state of Chitta. Chitta has a natural tendency to be attracted and affected towards the outside world that creates ripples, unsteadiness, and restlessness in the mind. As a result, mind cannot concentrate and achieve a blissful state, Chitta Prasadana. So there are methods to attain Chitta Prasadana. मैत्री करुणा मुदितोपेक्षानां सुख दुख अपुण्य पुण्य विषयानां भावनाश्च चित्त प्रसादनम. Undisturbed calmness of mind is attained by cultivating friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and indifference towards the wicked. Patanjali suggests that Chitta Prasadana can be attained by cultivating the right attitude toward different kind of people. So he has explained how our behavior, how we should react or we should behave with our neighbors, right? So the attitude of friendship, if there is someone who is happy, so there should be attitude of friendship towards that person. And if a person is sad or in misery, so there should be compassion for him, and there should be joy, mudita, towards virtue, towards punya, and indifference, that means upeksha, towards viciousness, which is apunya. It can be helped to achieve chitta prasadana, blissful and tranquil state of mind. For today, that is the matter, and we'll continue this chapter in the next class, maybe tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can ask. You can unmute your mic. Yeah.
Didi, can you explain 19th sutra?
19th sutra, bhav pratyaya.
Yes.
Yeah. So bhav pratyo videhe prakriti layanam, right? See, if you will see, there is a sutra about sampragya samadhi. and Asampragya Samadhi. The 17th and 18th shloka, sutra, is about Sampragyat and Asampragyat Samadhi. So they have first spoke about the Samadhi, and then they have told that if that Samadhi we are practicing with attachment, with the worldly causes, so that is Bhav Pratyam.
Okay.
Yeah, so when such Samadhi is not